Okay.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good, James. How are you?
I'm doing well. Doing well.
Good. How's Miss Liz today?
I am recovering from traveling and I developed a cold from all of my nieces and nephews this weekend.
Oh, that's
Where did
fun.
you travel to? You definitely didn't go to Denmark this time.
No, we were in Michigan. And yeah, it was just my sister and I who don't live in Michigan, we like to go see our family in the fall. Usually this time of the year, it's beautiful with all the trees, and it sure was.
Yeah, that it is. Good morning, Casey.
Good morning.
All right, well, it's 10 o'clock, so we're going to get started here. Um, let's do a couple of things. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to throw into the chat oh, here comes some more. So let me just hold on a minute. Um, so first of all, if we could have some cameras, I'd sure love it. But I get it if you're at your other jobs, that doesn't work out so well. It's just hard to teach to black screens. With that, I am going to put into the chat a set of folders for you to use to take notes in. Um, the reason I do this is because at the end of the day, if you just sit in class and listen to me and you don't have a place to capture information, um, it's hard to have that reference material back. So I've thrown that in the chat for you guys to quickly download and print if you're in a capability to be able to do that. If not, take really good notes along the way and then print that out at a later date and time. So those are the materials I'm going to go through. Let me ask this question. What do you guys hope to walk away from this class at the end?
To know a little bit more about listing contracts.
To know a little bit more about listing contracts. Okay. What else?
To amaze my
it.
client.
To amaze my client, okay? To be able to explain it to your client. Would that be a good win? If you could explain a listing contract to your client, right? Because at the end of the day, what's our number one proposition? Our knowledge, right? Our contract knowledge is our number one proposition. Lee, I don't know, can you get to the documents I put in the chat, or did you come on just a smidge too late? Can you see them? I'll be nice. I'll just put them there because I know it's hard for you. No. Okay. All right. I just sent them again. So, all right. So we're going to get started. And I'm going to share my screen. So hopefully this will work the way I want it to. This was a little different way for me to come in today, so it was a little odd. So we're going to start with the packet. So the packet that you have, the very first page of it is kind of a checklist. And it's a checklist of all of the different documents and things that you're going to need to put together when you go and upload command. But there's a lot of the actual contract names and forms there. So I put that there so that you guys have it, so you know where to start. And we're going to kind of use this as our conversation. One of the documents that's not required, and I'm not going to go over it today because we hit it with the same information in the buyer contracts, is it's really important that even though we don't use and require to do the definitions of working relationships, I would make sure that you take the time that your seller understands those different relationships, the difference between an agency relationship versus a transaction broker relationship to a customer, right? Because that's going to be very important for them to understand, especially if you're hosting open houses and a buyer walks in the door and you're treating them as a customer. You want to make sure they understand that. So with that, this is the checklist. The very first form we're going to go over is actually the exclusive right to sell listing contract. I'm going to flip over to my template in CTM, but this is what the document looks like that's blank. And I downloaded these from Dora. So that's where those are. And Lala, let me get you a packet into the chat so you can download that really quickly. And then hopefully we will be ready to roll.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Perfect. Okay. So here we go. So what we're looking at is actually a template in CTM. For those of you that don't have it or aren't aware of it, CTM is an electronic signature third party in the cloud vendor that we use here in Colorado. A lot of the agents, probably over 95% of the agents in the Denver metro area, use CTME. It is user friendly. It's a great collaboration tool, and it's the one third party software that I would tell you to invest in. The nice part about CTM is that you don't really need to buy it until you need it, because when you sign in, you immediately get access. And they're pretty quick about getting you access to our attorney's documents as well that are in there. And the first 30 days are free. So, you know, you can fire it up and hopefully get everything under contract and be getting that first commission check about the same time the first payment's due on the software. Or you can say, I want the software now because I want to learn how to use it, and I want to play with it, and I want to write fake contracts between Fred Flintstone and Barney Rubble. You can do that too. There's no right or wrong way. When you purchase and sign up for CTM, make sure that you put our office name in correctly. So your office name should read Keller Williams Avenues Realty, LLC. It's not K-Wave. It's not KW. It's not KW-AVS. It's Keller Williams Avenues Realty, LLC. That is super important because, one, that's the legal name of our company. And second of all, by when you put in the right legal name of the company, it gets you access to our attorney's disclosures that he's created for us, as well as all of his clauses. The other thing is your name needs to mirror your name on your license. Okay, so if your name on your license, if I know you as your middle name, okay, so I always pick on my cousin Trevor because his middle name is Trevor. His first name is Robert. His license probably would read Robert Trevor Agnew. Okay, even though everybody would know him as Trevor. So make sure when you put in your name that you're lining it up with your license. Okay. Questions? All right, here we go. So first of all of the forms that are created by the Real Estate Commission have a form number. You find those up here at the top, and it tells you when they went into effect. So this listing contract became mandatory January of 2023. That becomes very important when we're in crossover periods, or like earlier this year when they changed the contract to buy and sell on us in the middle of the year. You have to know you're using the most current contract. Okay, so if you're writing and signing the contract December 31st and the contract is changing January 1st, make sure you're using the right ones. Okay, you want to make sure you have the exclusive right to sell listing contract. I always start with seller agency because that, of course, is the highest level of representation that I'm going to have with a client. So that's where we're going to start. The date here, this is the date that you are signing it with your client, right? So if I was meeting with my client tomorrow, I would date it 10/25. Okay. The agreement, this is an agreement between the seller and the brokerage firm. I am just the broker assigned to that. In section 2, you will always check 2.1, the multiple person firm, because there's more than one broker in our office. The only environment that you would ever select a one-person firm is if you went out on your own and there was no other brokers in there. If you were just an independent, nobody else in the office with you that had a license. So you're going to always, as long as you're with K-Wave, you're going to check the multiple person firm. The seller's name. Obviously, this is a template, so my template's name is Listing Template 2023. You want to make sure that the seller's name that's on the listing contract matches the names on the property. So pro tip, when you are working with a potential seller, always, and I mean always, get an O&E, because that way you know the exact names of the client as to how they took title. Okay, it's also going to tell you the full legal description of the property. So you want to make sure that you know exactly how the seller's name is. I seem to have recently been having the pleasure of doing a lot of estates. So the owner of the home has passed away. There is an executor who is on the property. Then the seller probably will become the estate of the deceased person by somebody's named personal representative. If you're dealing with an estate, if you're dealing with an LLC, if you're dealing with a power of attorney, I've got another one where dad is alive. Dad's pretty with it. I've met him, but his kids have said, Dad, you can't sign paperwork. So one of the kids has a power of attorney. So I want to know exactly how the power of attorney reads. So if you're dealing with that, the O&E is not going to give you that information. So make sure you get it from the person that you're meeting with. So that way you have it right from the very beginning.
So, but
Okay.
in that seller section, so instead of listing template, so is there a way you could do it and show us that example?
Yep.
So you would just, okay.
So here I am in CTM, right? So if I want to do it, so I'm going to click enter the name of, so it's going to be the estate of, well, if Margaret could type correctly, the estate of John Doe. Okay. And then the name would be Mary Smith. Whoops. Uh-oh. I probably totally messed up my template now, but I don't care. And that would be a personal representative.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So then if I were to save this, and I'll go ahead and save it because I can fix it. So then when you go to print it, see how it shows the estate of John Doe? And then when you come down to the signature boxes, there's Mary Smith's name and she can sign it like that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Of course. Now I got to put it back. What's my name? Listing templates. 2023, was that my name? Because I think I saved it. All right. Good question. So we're gonna put the seller's names in there. The brokerage firm is automatically going to pull over based on how you set up your account. In this case, I have co-listing agents of Stacy. If Stacy's not co-listing with me, I'll take that off. Okay. Property. This is where you're going to put in the property legal description. Again, this is where getting that O&E is super important. Don't use the ones that show up in Realist. Don't show up the ones that show up in the tax records. Those typically are not the full legal descriptions. A full legal description will look like Lot 1, Block 7, somebody's subdivision, County of Jefferson, State of Colorado. Okay, you want to copy and paste that from the O&E or the transfer deed in this section. Okay. Then you're also going to, I'm bouncing between the printed copy versus the template because the template didn't bring it all over. And then here is where you're going to put in the street address, 123 Main Street, Arata, Colorado, 80005. Okay. So that's in section 3.4. Again, critical information in these first two sections. And here's why it's so important you get it correctly. When the buyer's agents come to write an offer on your property, they're going to sync to your document. Well, if your document is the one that controls how the legal description and the address and the seller's name appears in every document moving forward, you got to make sure it's 100% accurate. Okay. Questions on that? Okay. Section 3.5. Affordable housing. We have communities throughout the Denver metro area that are deemed affordable housing homes. Affordable housing in most counties means that the affordable housing division of that county will determine the maximum sale price that a property can be sold for. There's a lot of rules around affordable housing as far as the income requirements of the buyers. So as I'm talking to a seller, again, my O&E is going to help me know this, but I'm going to ask the seller, is your home part of an affordable housing program? Here's the deal. You never know where they are. There is actual affordable housing up in Vail. Okay. So primary areas here in the metro that have it, Green Valley Ranch. Central Park has a lot of them. There's also, I can't remember the name of the subdivision. I sold one. The address was on Albion, 4100 South Albion. So just always ask and read in the legal descriptions and it'll tell you. Okay. If it's not part of an affordable housing program, you do not check the box. If the seller says, yes, it is, you've got some homework to do to understand the rules of that affordable housing program and how to be able to properly market that. So if you do run into those, reach out to me and I can absolutely help you with it. I have done that. Section 3.6 talks about whether this is a sale or a lease. We do not do property management in our market center outside of property we own. So there's no environment that you will ever check 362. So always leave that blank. Section 3.7, the listing period. This is where you're going to enter the period of when you're going to do the listing. So I want to show you this. So it begins on, so if I'm meeting with my customer tomorrow, it's going to start on 10/25. This second block, you can leave blank and then come down here and it talks about when is it going to end. So this is when you're going to put your ending time frame. This is a negotiation piece. I think it's very important to understand the markets that you're in as you're working your way through this. My general rule of thumb in my personal business is that I always do a 6-month program and I always end it on the last day of the month. So I take a 6-month listing period. However, I have done less. When the market was super hot in 2022 and I had a client that said, Margaret, if you can't sell this house in 6 weeks, you're out. So I did talk him into a 90-day because I told him I needed it to get to the closing table. Okay. Also, if you've got a very unique property, Maybe you have a property that's going to take longer to sell. Maybe it's a high dollar item, or maybe it's clear up in the mountains, or it's got a very unique floor plan, whatever it is, and it's going to take longer. There is absolutely nothing wrong with doing a 12-month listing contract. Okay. So that's how you fill out that section in 3.7. So again, when you guys send in your contracts for Corey and I to review, we're not going to tell you anything's wrong unless you got your dates totally messed up. But if I was to see, if somebody were to come in and give me an end date of November 30th and they're writing it on 10/25, I might question it. But it's not wrong. Okay. Section 3.8, this teaches and talks about applicability of terms, what they mean. What does NA or deleted means? If that's in there, then the entire provision is not applicable. It also defines MEC as the mutual execution of a contract, meaning the date that both parties have signed. Section 3.9 defines a day, which means a day ends at 11:59 p.m. Mountains time, unless you put in a time different. And then in 3.9.2, you're going to want to always check the will box. Okay. Questions so far? As I'm going through this with you guys, I am kind of explaining these things to you as if I was sitting in front of you as a seller.
Hey, Mark, I have
Okay.
one question for you.
Sure.
On that listing period, can that be longer than 1 year if you know that you've got a property it's gonna take a while, it's really, really unique? Is that okay?
You know, it's interesting you asked that because I don't know. I want to say yes, but I remember I had one, you might remember, Jeff, when I had that big custom build. And I put them under a 3-year buyer agency, and I got some major pushback on doing it, that I should keep it at 12 months. So I think if it's not in, it has to be, I think there's a very strong guiding principle that you don't want to write them for longer than 12 months. Now, that doesn't mean that I wouldn't start getting my amends signed earlier in the process than I wouldn't wait to day 363.
Thank you.
Good question. Okay. So in 3.9.2, when I'm explaining that to a seller, I just say, you know, we're checking this box in the event we're working with a contract and if something should have happened to fall on a Saturday, Sunday, or a holiday that we're not aware of, we're just going to automatically move that to the next business day. That's what 3.9.2 says. Okay. Section 4, brokerage relationship. So, Mr. Seller, this entire section goes through the different relationships that a broker can have with a consumer. And it also talks about what happens in the event that I end up in a situation where I have both parties. So we've got the broker, the agency relationship. That is the highest level of relationship in which I am working for you and only you, and my responsibilities are completely aligned with yours. My role is to keep you aware of any risks with the things that are happening within the contract, to talk to you as a fiduciary, and basically to be your advocate. The second level of relationship is a transaction broker. The transaction broker is loyal to the transaction, and I can work with one or both sides of the party as a transaction broker. I still have to disclose anything that's a material fact to both parties. And, you know, I still make sure that things get done on time. The third relationship is, Mr. Seller, I would never have this with you, but I could have it with somebody who's the buyer, and that's a customer. And basically that's someone that's unrepresented. So you'll remember I work at a brokerage that has multiple brokers. We oftentimes see where another broker in our office will represent the buyer as an agent relationship, and I'll have that agency relationship with you. And we can do that because each broker is working independent, even though we're under that same umbrella. In the event that we should have a buyer who I already have an agency relationship with want to purchase your home, and I have an agency relationship with you, I obviously can't be an agent for both of you. So this contract therefore will allow me to move to transaction broker for both parties and still get you guys both to the finish line. So that's what this section talks about. Section 5 literally explains to you whether I'm a transaction broker or an agent, everything that the commission requires me to do for you. Section 5.8 does say that in the event that I get a phone call from a prospective buyer or buyer's broker, that I will let them know about any other offers. And you're good with that, right? So here's why I ask my sellers that, right? First of all, I've not yet had a seller say, please don't tell them anything. Because they're very smart with the multiple offer situation and everybody wants a bidding war on their sellers, right? Every seller wants a bidding war, even though I wouldn't say we really ever have them, right? But that's how you get the most amount of money for your house. But you could have a seller who says, no, I don't want you to tell them anything. I don't even want them to know if we got another offer or not. Then you would check the will not box. Okay. Questions on that section? Section 6, additional duties of the seller's agent. This here, Mr. Seller talks about that it is my job to promote your interest with good faith, loyalty, and fidelity, that I'm going to seek a price and terms that we set forth in this listing contract, and I am going to counsel you throughout the entire program. So again, I basically already told him that, right? When I went through the different relationships, but I'm just pointing it out where it shows that it's part of the contract. Section 7, Mr. Seller, this is the section that talks about how I'm going to be paid and how that commission that's charged is going to be handled. So, and I'm just going to clarify this. This is what Margaret Gate Homes does. Okay. This is not saying that you always have to do it this way. Okay. In our market center, there's a minimum of 2% per side that you can collect. So if you want to go down lower, you can. Okay. So, Mr. Seller, as we talked about in the listing consultation, I charge a competitive rate of 6%, of which 2.8% of that will be paid to the cooperating buyer broker. Okay, guys, with what's going on in our industry right now, explaining this to your seller is going to be super important. And he might say, if we didn't talk about it during the listing consultation, it might come up here where they say, well, can we like reduce your fee to like 5.5 and then cut that buyer broker fee to 2.3? Or can we cut the buyer broker fee? You're going to get questions like that. Okay. How are you handling those? Right? What is your objection handler in that? This is how I would explain it. So Jeff, that's a great question. And yes, we could consider paying a buyer broker less than 2.8%. Let me tell you a little bit more about that. 2.8% is very competitive here in the marketplace. We see everything from, 2.5 to 3 seems to be what we typically, what is competitive. 2.8 I like to do because it's a fair rate. Here's my concern if we go less. If we have a professional buyer broker on the other side, like myself, they have signed an agreement like I'm signing with you to sell your home. They have signed one on the other side to represent the buyer. And in that buyer agreement, that buyer has agreed to make sure that that professional buyer's agent is going to get a minimum of 2.5 or 2.8, whatever, 3, whatever the agreement is. When they sign that, what I have had happen is that buyers will say to me, hey, does this property we want to go see, is that paying your minimum, Margaret, of whatever I have in there? And if the event it's not, I've had buyers say, then I don't want to go see the property. So, Mr. Seller, I don't want to be in a situation where, because we're not paying a competitive rate to the buyer's broker, that buyers may decide not to come see your house. Jeff was really intent there with me for a minute. What'd y'all think of that? Did it sound like I might have said it a few times?
It's really hard to not say typical.
It is. But did you notice I didn't?
You did once.
I started to, yeah. But I use the word competitive. Right? Frequently, often, usually. I think you can slide typical in once in a while, but I wouldn't say that's what we have to do, right? It's to the seller's advantage to pay it, right? And being able to explain that to them is huge. Okay. All right. The key part in 711 is to make sure that this number one is the total commission, the listing agent plus whatever buyer co-op you're paying. Okay. If you have a seller who says, I am only paying you, Liz, the buyers are on their own, and you agree to 4% or 3% or 2%, whatever it is, then it would be 4, but then you'd have to put the 0 here. So always make sure this first number is the total of both brokers added together. Okay. Lease commission, we're not going to have them because we don't do leases. 7.1.3 is any other compensation the seller is offering. You could have a situation where, and we do tend to see it a little bit more frequently here, you might have a seller say, hey, you know what, James, if you can get this house sold, I know it's October 24th. And my house looks like crap. And so I'm not going to be ready for 2 more weeks. But if you can get this house sold and closed by December 31st, James, I'll give you an extra $2,500. That bonus compensation would go in 713. There's a listing that one of the luxury agents up in the foothills did. It's $13 million listing. And what that seller said is that, hey, if any of the brokers that come to your broker open actually become the buyer, I'll give them an additional 1% commission. So instead of 2.8, they're offering 3.8 if you went to the buyer, if you went to the broker open. Okay. So if you have a seller that does that, great. If not, the answer is none. I have not yet had a seller fill out 713. Okay. When is commission earned? Your commission is earned at the time of the sale of the property within the listing period by the seller, the broker, or any other person. I want you to read that. If your seller sells the property without using you, you still get commission. 722 says the broker finding a buyer who's ready, willing, and able, and then the seller doesn't follow through. Okay. 723, any sale of the property within 90 days after the listing period expires to anyone with whom the broker negotiated and whose name was submitted, the seller will or will not owe the commission. So this is the holdover period. You guys, this is the section that protects you. This is how I explain it. And I will tell you, yes, I have had to go after commission on this one. That's why I'm passionate about this for you guys, right? In the event the listing contract terminates, either because it comes to an end or you and the seller agree to terminate the agreement early. If you have filled out this section with a certain number of days and you've checked the will box and you give the seller a complete list of everybody who you negotiated with, in this case, with the sellers, I just give out the broker names. If they sell to those people within 90 days of the end of your listing period, you get paid. You're supposed to. Okay. So when I'm talking to a seller about this, I'll say, so here's what this holdover period means. It's not uncommon for a buyer to drive mom and dad or their sister or brother, or they just drive by the house and they park across the street and the seller's outside mowing the lawn. And a conversation gets started between you, the seller, and this buyer prospect. And the buyer might say to you, you know, hey, Casey, you know, I know we're submitting an offer. We love your house, but, you know, if you were to terminate your agreement with your listing agent, we could terminate our buyer broker and then we all could save money because you wouldn't have to pay commissions and we wouldn't have to pay as much for the house. What do you think? We'll go fire our broker tonight if you fire yours. So Mr. Seller, in the event that were to happen, you'd still pay me, right? So I use that as an example with my sellers so that they understand it's just to not play games without being a mean jerk about it. Does that make sense? Okay. When is it payable? At the end of the sale. The limitation on third-party compensation. This just says that we are not permitted to receive markups for services performed by a third party. So, you know, Mr. Seller, I am going to help, you know, between the title company possible different repair companies. We do not mark up the fees that those people charge. We get nothing for that. We refer you people because they're good people. Section 9 talks about the fact that the property is going to be listed in the MLS, and what the various marketing methods are going to be. So in section 9.1.1, you're going to check the property will or will not be submitted to one or more MLS, and it will or will not be submitted to one or more property information exchanges. There is always the possibility of sellers who are afraid of, they don't want their property in the MLS. So you would check the will not box, right? Now, if you're going
Why
to
wouldn't
do,
why wouldn't they want it the MLS? They don't want people bugging them?
yep. You're also going to find in 914 and 915, the property address and listing will or will not be displayed on the internet. There are a lot of our seniors that don't trust the internet, so they don't want it out there. They don't want anybody seeing the inside of their house. So if you have this conversation, and I know Amanda had one about this time last year where this sweet, sweet seller, she did not want her property on the MLS. She didn't want her neighbors to know her house was for sale. She didn't want a sign in the yard. She didn't want it on the internet. She didn't want anybody knowing what the inside of her house was going to look like. And it became a they ultimately got her to see the light of, we can't get you the most amount of money if I can't advertise it. Right? So, but you could run into those. Right? So if you do, those, you would have to check the will not boxes here and then get really good and clear about how you're going to sell it. If you ever sign in a community that doesn't allow signage. So I think about Castle Pines Village. Castle Pines Village does not allow for sale signs down in the village. Do you know how you know if a house is for sale in the village? Jeff is shaking his head up and down. How do I know in Castle Pines Village, Jeff, that a house is for sale?
It's only through the internet, I think. You can't do any signage because they call it a sheriff's on you, and I've physically been there.
Oh, when you did an open house down there? Okay, if you do a listing in Castle Pines Village and your house is for sale, on the marker for your address, they have a little pine cone that the realtors can buy, and you put a pine cone up on the address marker, and that is the indication that that property is for sale.
I didn't know that, but I did meet sheriff.
That's, yeah, Castle Pines Village does not allow signage, right? Which is why they do a lot of community broker opens on the weekends, where people just drive around. So yes, it's know the communities, right? If you cannot put a for sale sign up, 912, seller authorizes the use of electronic and other marketing methods except, I would put in there, no yard sign. Seller does not authorize you to use a yard sign, so you would put yard sign in there. In this case, it's none. Section 9.2, what kind of lockbox are you using? How are people getting access to the property? We use a manual lockbox. If you're using the Century Lock ones, those are going to be electronic. If they're like my house and you've got the pin pad on the front door where you just put in a code and it automatically opens, some sellers now will just have they'll create a special code just for showings. Like my personal one, I think I can have up to like 9 or 10 different codes I can put in it. And so you might have that as a check. So you would use this other one, this box right here. Under other instructions, no showings before 9 a.m. or after 6 p.m. That's not a standard. I put that there to help jog my memory. If you've got sellers with littles, they may say, you know what? I don't want anybody in my house before 9 o'clock. Getting these kids breakfast and getting everybody out the door for work and school, please, nothing before 9 a.m. Could be the same thing with dinner. You could also have a healthcare worker or somebody who works a night shift, so they sleep during the day. You could have no showings before 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. Right? You could have no showings on Sundays. You could, like, we're moving into the holidays. One of the biggest, our objections that we'll hear from sellers right now is, well, I got family coming in for Thanksgiving and I really don't want people interrupting our Thanksgiving dinner to see our house. Then you could put in here, no showings on Thanksgiving weekend holiday. Thanksgiving holiday weekend, right? Whatever your restrictions are on the instructions, all go there under other instructions. Section 9.2, who's authorized to be in the property? For me, I'm going to allow actively licensed real estate brokers and licensed appraisers. If you don't have a license, you're not getting in that house without another broker. That's pretty much a non-negotiable for me with my sellers because it's for their protection. If they're willing to let unlicensed inspectors in there, that's fine. What I tell them is let's find out who the inspector is and then let's make that decision versus just automatically putting it in the listing contract. Section 931. This is what are you going to specifically do to sell this property? So this is taken from the 14-step marketing plan directly out of Ignite from way back in 2015 when I started. I'm leaving it on the screen so you guys can screenshot away as you need to. There goes the cameras coming out already. However, here's the thing. If you're not going to stage the home, so we've got a listing that we went out to look at a couple of weeks ago, and this home is so gorgeous. I don't even know that I'm taking Stacy out to even look at it. Like, I don't think we need to. So I take the staging piece off. Maybe it's in Castle Pines Village and I can't put a for sale sign up, then take it off. Maybe I'm not going to do an open house, then take it off. Because guess what, you guys? This is a contract between you and the seller. So whatever you put in this marketing section, make sure you're actually going to do it. Okay? Questions? Section 932, seller authorizes video and pictures of both the interior and exterior of the property, except for, this is normally none in my world. However, if you have a client who has, I don't know, has a very expensive piece of art that they're not going to take down. Maybe they have the Mona Lisa. I don't know. They probably don't want that in the internet showing that they've got the Mona Lisa in their house. They might say, please don't take pictures or videos that include my Mona Lisa. If people are in the showings and they see the Mona Lisa, that's fine. But I don't want the internet knowing I have it. Okay, anything like that. It's very rare that I have a seller that puts anything in that section, but that's what it means. Section 9.4, this just talks about what happens at the termination of any marketing. Basically, I own the pictures, I own the videos, and I own everything. And Mr. Seller, you're not allowed to use them. Okay. All right. Questions on the marketing section? Okay. Seller's obligations to the broker. Yes, they have obligations to us. Mr. Seller, the first section 10.1 just states that you agree that all negotiations come through me. Right? If your neighbor stops by and say, hey, I'll give you 50,000 less than what you're listing it for, tell them, contact my broker. Okay? If your buyer, when we get under contract, wants to suddenly buy the pool table, that comes through me. Everything comes through me. Okay? Advertising, any advertising that you want to do, I need to see it first. My marketing team is going to give you the social media content that you can use, but anything else you're going to do, I want to make sure I see it first. So question, you guys, why do I care about that?
HUD regulations and so forth.
Fair housing. Do I want my seller stating, this is a great home for a family of this faith? No. Right? Do I want my seller saying this would make a great bachelor pad? I turned in an MLS one time that said that the little woman would love the laundry room. I turned it in. Yes, Liz, it was horrible. I was so mad. It was so bad. Stacy and I still talk about it like 6 years later. Okay. Section 10.3, Mr. Seller, this just states that you currently do not have an agreement like this signed with any other broker, nor have you received a list of submitted prospects from another broker. This is my chance to confirm that my seller is contractually telling me they don't have another listing agreement with somebody else. This becomes really important with expired listings when a seller calls you up and says, hey, I'm terminating my agreement with John Smith because we're not happy with what he's doing. We want you to sell our house. Well, here's the thing. If John Smith still shows that is active in the MLS, how do I know that that's not an active agreement still? So this is my way of protecting me, that the seller is stating that he's not part of this. Okay. Again, 10.4 just says I own all the photographs, videos, any artwork that I do. And then section 10.5 just talks about the Colorado Foreclosure Protection Act. And so I just need to confirm, Mr. Seller, that you have not received any notices that you are more than 30 days delinquent or in default on your mortgage, or any foreclosure notices. And that's all I say, right? And if they say, nope, we're current, I have to believe them. I'm not going to ask for it. Okay. All right. You guys all thought this was easy, didn't you? Section 11, price. I typically try and put my total list price there, where I'm going to be. However, in the event that the seller maybe is in the middle of a flip and it's going to be 60, 90 plus days before we actually hit the market, I might put on there, might write the words to be finalized prior to going live in the MLS, or to be determined. Please don't write TBD, because TBD is not a defined term in the contract. So if you're going to be using TBD, you need to spell it out, or you need to define it down in additional provisions. 11.2 terms. What terms are you taking? Are you taking cash, conventional loans, FHA, VA loans? Are you doing seller financing? Are you doing an assumable loan? This is where you want to make sure your property is FHA and VA eligible. If you're dealing with a condominium, make sure you've looked up on the FHA approved condos that it will take FHA. If you don't know how to do that, it's a great Google search, FHA approved condos, or you could do Margaret's Way and just call Mitch. I make him look them up for me. Okay. But what are you accepting? If you've got a house that's about ready to fall in, you might only take cash. Okay. Loan discount points, I have that as negotiated. Think about our rate buy downs right now, right? Everything's negotiated. Buyer's closing costs, FHA and VA. Remember that the seller, not all buyers can pay all of the fees associated with it. So there could be fees that the seller needs to pay on VA, like the broker commissions. And so, you know, you could put a flat dollar amount in there. I like to use the word as negotiated because every contract is different. And then what the buyer is not allowed to pay for, I just write any applicable disallowables. Do you guys understand that section?
I guess I'm a little confused on that.
Okay, so there are certain costs that when you're dealing with an FHA or VA buyer, they are not allowed by law to pay. Okay, so sometimes they will ask for the seller to contribute for those costs. Other times the lender will eat them. Okay, so in this section, the seller can say, I'm not willing to pay more than this much for the buyer's costs. So you could put a dollar amount in there where I have as negotiated. I like to use as negotiated because when we look at offers, it's really about the total, right? It's the purchase price plus what concessions you're asking me to make, all of that to look at the totality. So when I'm doing the listing contract with the seller, I'm letting him know there could be some fees that a buyer is going to ask us to pay for, and we're going to negotiate what those are. And there could be fees that the buyer is not allowed to pay for, And in that case, any applicable disallowable, if the lender or the buyer's agent isn't covering those fees, we may be asked to. Okay, did that help? Okay. Earnest money. Earnest money is a dollar amount, it's a flat fee that you're going to put in there. My little notes say it's between 1 to 2% of the purchase price or the list price. I usually like to go somewhere in the middle, but the other thing I like to do is I like to look at homes in that area to see what the market is bearing in that particular area. So lately I'm selling a lot of townhomes out in Green Mountain, and I will literally look in the community in the MLS and I'll pull into the search what the minimum earnest money is, because here's the deal. If 2% of the sale price is, let's say, $15,000, just to come up with a number, and every other condo that's active or recently pending is only asking for 10, do I risk not being in market or being competitive? So I calculate the 1 to 2%, but I also look to see what the trend is out there in that particular area. There's no wrong answer. Again, when you ask Corey and I to review your contracts, we're never going to tell you whatever your minimum earnest money is wrong. We might question it, but we're not going to tell you it's wrong. Okay. And then how do you want the earnest money paid? I always write personal check, cashier's check, or wire transfer. Bob just does cashier's check or wire transfer. There's no wrong answer. Okay. Seller proceeds. Mr. Seller, I really recommend you can get your money at closing either from as a cashier's check or a wire transfer from the title company. I've pre-selected electronic transfer for you, and let me tell you why I like that. I recently had, several years ago now, I sold a property for Jamie, and Jamie was moving to New Zealand, and she was super excited, and we got more money for that house than Jamie ever dreamed of. And it was exciting to know that we were sending her off to New Zealand in her retirement with a nice nest egg. Closing was on Friday. Saturday morning, Jamie calls me. And Jamie says, Margaret, do you have my check? And I'm like, no, I don't. Well, are you sure? Because I can't find it. I said, well, let me go back to my office and just double check after I get done here at the open house. Let me go by my office, just verify that I didn't accidentally pick it up, but I don't think I did. So I went to the office, checked, sure enough, I didn't have it. So I called Jamie back and I said, Jamie, I don't have your check. I said, but the good news is, and she goes, well, the good news is, Margaret, I found it. I couldn't sleep last night, and so I was shredding a bunch of paperwork, and it was like a couple pages in my shred pile. So what scared me is if Jamie would have shredded one more stack of paper, she would have shredded her check. So I really like the wire transfer for the security of it. I truly, by the way, you guys, that is a true story, right? And I tell that story to my sellers. And then I tell them, look, if you don't want to do the wire transfer, when we get to closing, you can change your mind. That's fine. Okay. FIRPTA. So there is a tax act in the United States with the IRS that talks about if we are dealing with a foreign investor, that the IRS may require a part of the sales proceeds to be withheld to pay that foreign investor's taxes. So, Mr. Seller, do you pay taxes in the United States? If they say yes, I move on. And if they say no, then I will stop and I'll say, okay, so do we need to look up if you meet the definition of a foreign investor? Most of them know. The title companies will double check. I know Land Title always does, but you need to ask that question to every single seller you work with so that you're consistent. Okay? Colorado withholding. If a seller is moving or lives out of the state of Colorado, they may be subject to withholding. So just there's rules that there's all kinds of questions and exceptions to it. The title company will help you with that. But in section 11.8, this is just telling the client, that the Colorado Department of Revenue may require part of your proceeds to be withheld. Now, if you already know that your seller is buying another property here in the state of Colorado, I probably don't even bring it up. But if I have a seller who is either in the process of moving or has moved out of state, I'm just going to give them a heads up on it. Okay. Deposit. The brokerage firm is authorized to accept earnest money deposits. We don't actually do those at K-Wave. We have our third-party title companies do it. All right. How we doing? We're like almost an hour in. Is this getting you guys what you wanted?
Yeah, this is great.
Awesome. Okay. I can see Liz taking notes like crazy.
Now, no, with the 11.7, when you were talking about that, you were saying the seller, but wouldn't that be the buyer? The buyer's agent would be the one that's dealing with the foreign, somebody that's right, because the seller is not going to be selling a property unless, I guess, he could be selling a property in another country. I guess I just
No.
wanted a little more
Yep, that's
clarification
fair.
on that.
I could live in China and own real estate in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So I would be there for a foreign investor, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm selling the property as a foreign investor, that is where FIRPTA comes into play. So if I am a foreign investor selling my
okay.
United
That
States
makes sense.
property, that is when you get caught into the withholding.
Got you.
Good question.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Inclusions. 13.1.1. This talks about all the things that are going to be included in the sale of the property. Mr. Seller, how many garage door openers do you have? And then I'm going to update right here where it says NA remotes, how many remote controls they have. Mr. Seller, do you have solar panels, water softeners, or security systems that are currently in the property? I am asking that question because it's not always obvious. Okay. If they say, well, yeah, didn't you see the solar panels when you walked up? Well, no, because they're on the back of the house. Okay. But these are going to be your triggers to get more information. The number one area that I see we get most confused on is security systems. We lease a system called from ADT, or we lease a system for Xfinity, and we claim we own a security system. Right? So just always be clarifying what they have and what they don't have. The biggest two are always going to be your solar panels and water softeners. And in both of those, you want to understand, do they own them outright? Are they being leased, or are there a loan against them where they're going to own them outright? So if they say, yes, they have those things, start asking a lot of questions. Okay. Other inclusions. This is where you're going to put what else is coming with the property. The refrigerator in the kitchen, the stove, oven, range, the dishwasher, the microwave, the washer, the dryer. You can see I have those there as trigger points for me. These are just to help me remember when I build my templates. The other things you could have on there would cooktops, wall ovens, fancy ice makers. You could have a whole host of things. You could have a second refrigerator in the garage or in the basement, or a chest freezer that is very popular, right? What are the things that are staying with the property?
So you keep this saved in CTME, and then when you go to actually do this, you just delete. So this is already set up this way in your CTME, or you set this
So-
up just specifically for this class?
Nope, I use them. So come on. So you can see here, I got 2022 CBS, 2023 listing template, 2023 buyer template, and then I have all my clients' names.
Okay.
So this is not a CTM class, but I'm gonna give you a really quick high level tutorial. So I'm gonna go create a contract, and I'm going to do an exclusive right to sell contract with a client. Then I can come down here, and you see where it says create by copying from an existing contract. So I hit create, I go find my 2023 listing template, and it auto populates all of that stuff for me. So I just have to update it.
Oh, wow, that's nice.
Yeah, it helps. It's nice to have the triggers, right? Because I mean, I've been doing this for 9-ish years, and there's still things that I'm like, oh my God, I forgot about this, right? So it's just good to have a template to help you trigger. Couple of things. when you are working with stoves and ovens and ranges, I see this all the time. I will see stove, comma, oven. Well, when you have a comma, that means that there's more than one, right? It's a separation showing an individual item, correct? Okay, some of you know the story of my grandmother, the English teacher who would return our wonderfully handwritten letters to our grandmother back circled with her red English ink, because she wanted to make sure we knew how to write. There is a box that's often found in a kitchen. And if you turn on things on the top, it will boil water. Or if you push another button and you open a door, you can slide things in and you can bake a cake. But it's one piece, right? That's a stove, oven, range. You can have another scenario where you've got the burners to boil the water in one place in the kitchen, but in the wall, you've got an oven. Those are two pieces. So you would have a cooktop and a wall oven, or sometimes you have double wall ovens, right? Or sometimes you got a wall microwave and a wall oven, right? Make sure you know the difference. Okay. It's probably, I think Jeff's been to enough of these contracts classes with me. He knows that's probably my number one pet peeve. And we're doing that, and I get that way because here's the deal. You don't want to represent you have a stove or a cooktop and an oven when you don't. Right? Now, you could argue, well, gee, they went out and looked with their eyes, but guess what? It doesn't matter. It's what's in the contract. Okay. The other thing to pay attention to when you're talking about inclusions and then in 13.2 exclusions is what are they taking with them? Or what is staying? Like if there is a very unique chandelier and in your conversation, part of your listing consultation, you discover that that was their great grandmother's chandelier and they're taking it with them, then have the conversation about taking it down. I had one that I didn't realize it. There was a porch swing. And I didn't have it listed as an exclusion anywhere because I didn't know. I didn't ask. And we got our first offer on this property and they had included in the inclusions in the contract to buy and sell the porch swing. Mrs. Seller started crying immediately over a porch swing. Okay. And I remember saying to her, Amy, what's wrong? And she said, my dad made that porch swing for us when we got married. And I said, then we'll exclude it because her dad had passed away. Right. But I didn't realize at the time of the listing contract that that porch swing needed to be an exclusion, and it almost cost them their porch swing. Right. Everything's negotiable in real estate and we were able to work it through, but making sure that you're asking those questions with them here. Right. So good stuff to be aware of. Under encumbered inclusions, solar panels. If solar panels are coming with the property, there's a very good chance you either have a lease or a loan on it. Dive in, dive in, dive in. And if the solar panels have liens on them, you're going to put their solar panels in 13.14. Okay. If they're being leased, they go in 13.16.1. So if it's a loan, it's 13.14. If it's a lease, it's 13.161. But you can see I got my triggers to help me remember them. Okay, exclusions, seller's personal property and staging items. I just default and put those on there all the time. These are the things that they are going to take with them. If the washer and dryer is going with them, that'll go in 13.2 versus 13.13. So having a good conversation sitting around the dining room table of what's going, what's staying. Trade fixtures. I don't see them very often. However, if you have someone with an in-home hair salon, are they taking the dryers and the sinks and all of those things with them? If so, you want to put those in 13.3. Okay, or if they're staying. Parking. There is plenty of lines in the actual listing agreement for you to fill in all of the different parking, right? We got 2 boxes there. Okay. So I show a 2-car attached garage and a 1-car detached garage. It's not uncommon. I see a lot of that in Wheat Ridge and Arvada where we've got an attached garage and then in the back, it's another one. Okay. So you could show those there, or you might have a carport and a garage. You guys all know the difference between a carport and a garage? Good. You're ahead of a lot of other agents because I see them not properly show them in the MLS. Then in the second half of 13.4 is the utility sheds. Any sheds that are in the backyards. Maybe there's a greenhouse. You could put a greenhouse in there. If there's a huge workshop, I know that one of the properties I'm working with right now, they have a great big huge 2,400 square foot pole barn, right? That would go there in other storage facilities. So 13.4 is big. 13.5 water rights. Typically, if you're running into water rights, you need to talk to Bob or I early. Deeded water rights, you're going to typically find when you're buying more larger pieces of land, especially if they've got a well. If somebody owns the water rights and they are being transferred separately, those are going to be transferred with a general warranty deed. I don't see a lot of them. Someday I'm going to ask Kevin how many he sees even up in the mountains, but just be aware if you're dealing with water rights that you know what they are. If you have a well on the property, you could have a well permit without water rights. So to make sure you get a copy of the well permit, you guys, even if your seller doesn't have it, if you go to the Colorado Division of Water, you can look it up and get the well permit number. Stock certificates. If there are some of the water companies that actually includes water stock certificates when there's a transfer of ownership. You see a lot of that in Wheat Ridge and Lakewood with Consolidated Water, that there are 5 shares of Consolidated Water stock certificates that go with the property. Just ask your clients. You can also run into ditch rights. Ask, and then ask some more. Okay. What would you do about a kid's playground set you would want to leave behind and buyer wouldn't want it? Well, everything's negotiable. So if the seller wants to leave it behind in the listing contract, which is what we're doing today, I would keep it as in the inclusions. In the MLS, I would show it that the playground set is included. And if the buyer really doesn't want it, they're going to call it out, and then your seller or somebody's going to pay to get it removed. Hope that answered the question. You're welcome. All right. Title and encumbrances. Seller represents the property is solely in their name. Seller agrees to give broker copies of any relevant documents. Conveyance. So in a typical transaction, John Smith wants to sell his property. He's either going to sell it either with a special warranty deed or a general warranty deed. Do you guys remember from real estate school the difference? Okay. A general warranty deed goes back to the beginning of time, that it is a clean title all the way back. A special warranty deed is only during the seller is only warranting the amount of time that he owned the property and he isn't responsible for anything prior.
So when you're selling
the other.
Sorry,
okay,
go
so
ahead,
James,
Jeff.
go first. You go ahead.
Oh, okay. Isn't the special warranty deed, you want to do the special warranty deed when you're selling somebody's property, but then when you're working with the buyer, you want to use the general warranty deed because that has the most amount of warranties?
Most
It's the
protection.
strongest?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Good question. And it was a great segue to exactly where I was going with. So thank you. So the last couple of times that Damien has talked to us, and Damien is our office attorney. Here's the thing, whether it's a special warranty deed or a general warranty deed, the major title companies treat them the same. So if you're using land title, security title, first security, any of those, whether it's a special or a general, your buyer gets the same level of protection. It's Damien's belief that very soon we're only going to have one. So you are correct, James. If I'm representing the seller, I'm going to push to get the special warranty deed. But if a buyer asks for general, I'm not going to fight them over it. I'm not going to lose it. I'm not going to lose an offer over it. So when I'm talking to my sellers, when I'm doing the listing contract, is I just explain that to them just as I did you guys, right? Right now, the title companies, I highly recommend Land Title or First Security. Both of them secure the buyer in the title policy, the same whether it's special or general. So I don't know that we really care. That's how I would explain it to my seller. If you are dealing with an estate, then it would be a personal representative's deed. And remember, the personal representative's deed actually have to be created by the attorney of the estate. Okay, questions? Good ones. Jeff, did you have something too right there?
No, it's just, I was saying that Damien's comment before about being the same, becoming the
Yeah.
same.
Now, I'm having a wonderful experience with another title company right now. And I'm sure glad that my buyer has a general warranty deed because I'm not so sure. Actually, they'll be fine, but I think they've dropped every ball possible for the last 3 weeks.
Who, the
All right,
seller's
so
agent?
I'm the buyer's agent. I didn't get to pick that title company. I
Oh,
can tell you this, the next time I see him if I'm writing an offer, I'm gonna make the seller pick somebody else. It was that bad, I won't ever use them again on either side. Monetary encumbrances. This is where you show the liens that the seller has against the property. So I'm showing here just to help me remember approximately X amount of money to the name of the lien holder for first deed of trust. It's not uncommon to find a homeowner that has a HELOC. So you might have approximately X amount of money to Wells Fargo for first deed of trust and approximately different amount of money to HELOC company name for second deed of trust. And your O&E might also turn up a federal tax lien that they haven't paid, or it might also turn up a judgment because he didn't pay for the wedding ring. Yes, I did have that happen. So those O&Es are going to tell you the liens on the property. Why do we care about that? As listing agents, why do we care?
because that money's gonna have to either be paid back or the buyer's gonna have to pay.
No, the buyer's not going to pay the liens of the seller. We want to make sure there's enough equity that the seller is going to be able to actually pay off everything with the sale price of the home and pay the closing costs. Now, in our current environment, most people have plenty of equity. Back in 08 and 09, in the back of the day of the short sales, right? There were many a seller who did not have sufficient equity in the home. They couldn't get a purchase price big enough to pay off all the debt and cover the closing costs. So we need to know that up front. Kevin was telling us the other day in one of our leadership meetings, he actually has a buyer up in the mountains or Castle Rock, one of the other two offices, that they are actually having to do a short sale because they can't sell the house for enough money to pay off all the liens and pay the expenses. So that's why we care. Okay. Tenancies 14.5. In the event that there is a lease on the property, you want to know that. Current lease in place until January 31st, 2024. Right? Payable at X amount of dollars per month. You want to know what you got if you've got tenants in place. Okay. Section 15, evidence of title. Seller agrees to give the buyer written information about the title. That's where we get it with the owner's title insurance. Do not check the abstract of title. My biggest regret from 1990, when did we do that? 1997 was we actually had the abstract on our family farm and I shredded it. I was sick when now 26 years later going, man, I wish I had that. Association assessments. If the property is in a community where there is a homeowners association, how much are they paying per month? Or how much are they paying and how often? Is it monthly? Is it quarterly? Is it annually? Are there multiple HOAs? So that's what you're going to put in that second sentence about how much they pay and the frequency. Then the other part is, are there any special assessments? If there are, you're going to put them in where it says behind the word except. If there are no special assessments, you're going to put none other. And then here, the seller also agrees to deliver to the buyer any information about assessments if it comes in the near future before the sale. Possession. When is the seller going to give the buyer possession? Right? This is what you want to know, right? If it's a vacant property, you could write in there upon closing. If they need a post-closing occupancy agreement, what does that look like? It could be they'll deliver it, May 31st, or it could be upon closing, or it could be they need 10 days after closing. Sometimes we put in there as negotiated, because sometimes, depending on the market, they might have a certain idea in mind, but all of a sudden they get an offer that is so good that they're willing to do a double move. So having those conversations with your seller as to what their plans are around handing over possession. All right, section 18, buyer's obligations. You are required to disclose to any prospective buyer all adverse material facts that you know. Okay, talks, examples, structural defects, soil conditions, violation of health, zoning, or building laws, and non-conforming uses and zoning variances. If you know it, you must disclose it. Okay, the seller's obligations. 18.2, seller agrees or does not agree to provide a property disclosure. You guys, it is always in the seller's best interest to complete one. You flippers who tell me you don't know anything about the property after you just spent the last 6 months gutting it and rebuilding it are full of baloney. Okay, you know that you tore down that wall. You know that you put in that new furnace. You know that you put on that new roof. Disclose it. One of the estates that I just recently settled, the woman who was serving as the executor really didn't know anything about the interior of the property. I mean, she was friends with the lady, but knew nothing, right? But she lived in the community. So she did know the source of water. She did know the HOA. And she did know where the mailbox was. So that's what we put on the seller's property disclosure. She didn't know the age of anything, right? We did find a receipt that showed when she'd bought the hot water tank, or the tankless hot water. So we put that on the seller's property disclosure because she was going through paperwork, she found it. But she didn't have any firsthand knowledge about the age of appliances or anything. And that's what we told them. We don't know. Like, this is a third party. So push people to do that. My other favorite one is the kids who are settling mom and dad's property and say they don't know anything. How many of you are blessed to still have your parents? Okay, so how many, if dad had to replace, Liz, if dad had to replace the hot water heater because he had to take a cold shower last week, would you have heard about it?
Definitely.
Definitely, right? If they got killed in a hailstorm and had to replace the roof and the siding, would you know about it? So you kids who say you know nothing, crazy. Okay, so just have a very candid conversation with your seller about, this isn't saying that you know every finite detail, but tell us what you know. And so, Liz, I know that you don't have firsthand knowledge of everything, but so, and you say to me, yeah, dad did mention there was that hailstorm that went through a couple of years ago. Then put that on there, right? Replaced roof a couple of years ago due to hailstorm, right? It's better than not saying anything. Okay. Lead-based paint. If you have a property in which the building permit was issued prior to January 1st, 1978, we do need to complete a lead-based paint disclosure. Agents, here's what I'm going to tell you. It's about when the permit was issued. It's not when the property was built. So if you have a property that was built, especially in the first half of 1978, is it highly likely it was permitted before January 1st? Say yes. right? So I would, anything built in 78, I would still get my lead-based paint disclosures. I mean, the reality is you could take a house that's built in 2000 and get a lead-based paint disclosure if you want to. But I better to disclose than to not disclose. Carbon monoxide alarms, Mr. Seller, according to the rules of Colorado, a property has to have operational carbon monoxide alarms installed within the 15 feet of the entrance of every bedroom. Let's make sure we have that done. We also need to make sure that we have smoke alarms in those same areas. Mr. Seller, you agree that the property will be conveyed in the condition as it is the date of the contract as when we turn it over. All right, section 19, Mr. Seller, this just says that in the event that I am not performing the duties under this listing agreement, that you have the right to cancel this agreement at any point in time. My only ask is that if you are unhappy, let's have a conversation. And that's literally what I tell my sellers. Section 19.2, Mr. Seller, this explains to you that I also have the right to terminate this contract. Now, I used to have a coach, and if you ever take Sue Vensel's class, I don't know if she still does it this way, but she says it like this. So, Mr. Seller, section 1 says how you can fire me, and section 2 says how I can fire you. And the very first question you're wanting the sellers to ask you is, why would you, Jeff, terminate this contract? Because if you do, you don't make any money. Right? And my answer to that is, well, if you always decline all of the showings, if I get feedback that the house has got dirty underwear all over the floor, that it smells like dead animals, and we're not cooperating and being good partners to get this house sold, I might decide to terminate the listing because we're not getting anywhere. Okay. And again, I always use extreme examples with people because then it's not their world. Okay. Section 20, forfeiture of payments. This is a strategy. So, Mr. Seller, in the event that we have a buyer who, as a result of their default in the contract, the earnest money is lost by the buyer, we're going to split that between the two of us 50-50. Now, I stated that matter of fact. Okay. Many of you, and there's nothing wrong with this, will check paid to seller in its entirety. Okay. And there's nothing wrong. If you send in a listing contract for Corey or I to review and you have checked box number 1, we are not going to tell you to change it. On the same token, if you do number 2, I'm not going to tell you to change it. Let me tell you why I choose to do number 2. Okay. So, oops, he just walked away. Okay. So Liz, you're the seller. Okay. In our little scenario here. And if the buyer defaults right before closing, are you going to be very happy? Not at all, right? It's going to be the worst possible thing that can happen to you, right? Mm-hmm. And at that point in time, you know that that earnest money is being forfeited. Do you remember this conversation? Probably, right? And you're going to remember that I told you that we're going to split that. So now here we go. The world has just come to an end. You've got the house half boxed up. Nothing looks like it did when it was a showing. And the buyer's defaulted on the contract and we got to go back on the market. You've got another mortgage payment you got to make. You are inconvenienced beyond everything and you are mad as heck, right? So if I came to you as the broker and said, oh, Liz, I can't believe this happened. And I know that this is really a rough time for you guys. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Do you remember that part of the contract where we split the earnest money? I'm going to go ahead and let you guys take the full amount. So that will help you guys with some of these additional expenses and the inconvenience. Is that okay by you?
Yes.
Okay. How do you feel about this right now?
Fantastic.
You feel better, right? I've been put in I have been able to do something as your broker to help with the crap, right? Mm-hmm. Now let's do it the other way. at the very beginning, you get 100%. The deal falls apart. You know, right from the very beginning, you're getting 100%. Are you still mad?
Yeah.
Yes. Can I do anything to help you?
Nope.
Nope. That's why I always check number 2, because when those situations happen, I can do something to make my seller feel better. It's called being a hero. Okay. It's a strategy, you guys. And thank God, knock on wood, I have never been in the situation where I had to have that conversation with a seller. But I will tell you that there are other people in the coaching program that have, and have been very glad that they checked box 2, because they were able to help a seller through that rough period. Didn't change the situation, but it made the seller feel different. Make sense?
And that's for earnest money?
In the case that the buyer defaults, yes, sir.
And that means they get half of it and you get half.
Right, but I don't want their half.
So
I never want their
essentially-
half.
So
Go ahead.
if the buyer defaults on the loan, and you clicked box 2, then that means that you just are looking better to your seller because you're giving them your half.
Exactly.
So if you would have just done 1, then they would have gotten it regardless. But because they checked number 2, you look like the hero.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. Well, that's okay. I don't know why you'd ever want to click 1 then. I guess if you wanted to keep 1, it was. Thank you very much.
You're right, right? And it's strictly a strategy, right? Because if the seller is knows they're getting number 1, they're still mad and they're still inconvenienced no matter what. It's just a strategy to help them over the hurdle mentally. It really all it is. Okay. And if that's the only thing you take from my class today, it was a win. Number 21, cost of services and reimbursement. Mr. Seller, neither I or my team is going to order products or services for you that we expect you to pay for without your permission. So I might order, I don't know, I'll order the title work, but you have to give me permission to order it. I'm not going to expect you to pay it if you don't give me permission. 22, disclosure of settlement statements. You will get a settlement statement in advance of closing showing exactly how everything lays out. Section 23, Mr. Seller, you agree to keep the property up and maintain it all the way through closing in the event we get a Colorado hailstorm. Any damage, you're going to have to work with your insurance company and go through that process to get the home back in the condition it was at the time they put in the offer. Mr. Seller, in section 24, we agree to not to discriminate. We cannot discriminate on race, creed, color, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, marital status, familial status, physical or mental disability, handicap, religion, military status, hairstyle, texture, national origin, or ancestry of such person. So, Mr. Seller, this is exactly why I'm not going to give you any love letters in the event we get any, because I don't want you to know anything other than the name of the buyer that's buying. I don't care if they're from Mars with purple polka dots, and we can't discriminate on that. Section 25, if there's anything in this contract, Mr. Seller, that doesn't make sense, I've not been able to explain it, please, before you sign it, make sure that you seek legal counsel. Mediation, Mr. Seller, in the event that you and I get into a dispute regarding this document, we agree to go to mediation first. Through mediation, we agree to split the cost of the mediator. In the event we cannot solve our dispute in mediation and we do end up in court, Section 27 basically states that the losing party pays the costs and expenses of the winning party. In Section 28, I know, James, you're in the process of getting the house ready. This just states that I'm not going to actively start marking it or putting it in the MLS until you tell me you're ready to go. The second half of that section does show you that I do have a transaction coordinator. She is unlicensed, but she's going to be very helpful in getting us to the finish line and keeping track of dates and deadlines. In this particular case, that you will notice that she does have the same last name as I do, and yes, that is my daughter. Additional provisions, other things that you would put there in a listing contract. maybe you're gonna put a variable compensation in, like I'm writing one right now where we're listing 3 properties and we're agreeing to a commission break because it's a volume play. And I'm literally going to write a provision that states, the first of the 3 properties will be at 6%, the second of the 3 properties will be at 5.5%, and the third property will be at 5%. Now, some of you are going, well, why would you do that, Margaret? That sounds like a lot of things to keep track of. Well, because 3 years ago, I had a guy say, I'm going to have you sell all 3 of my properties, but you need to discount your commission. I discounted my commission and asked me how many of them I got to sell. 1. So now I won't do that, right? It's like, I'll give you some discounts, but it's got to be, don't play me. So those types of things would also go into the additional provisions. If you're doing a rebate on commissions on when you're getting a buy sell. So we'll do a whole class on clauses, which is one of my favorite classes to teach, and nobody ever shows up. So hopefully you guys will when it's that time. Attachments. This is if you have lead-based paint, your lead-based paint obligation of seller will go there. The seller advisory will always go there. Any other attachments to the contract, if there's a power of attorney attached, that will also go there. Section 30 just talks about that this is not to benefit anyone else. Section 31 just talks about that either if I give you a physical written contract or one through the electronic systems, those are considered actually delivered. 32 states that we can't modify it unless it's binding in writing. And Section 35 just says they have a copy of the contract. So seller signs it, I sign it, and away we go.
Now, when you do this, do you just bring your computer to your client's house and just fill this out on the computer, or do you take a paper copy so they can look it over and then you can explain it to them in person? What is your typical strategy in approaching that?
Depends on the client. Honestly, I don't do either of what you said. So
okay.
I will typically have filled out, I go and do my listing consultation, which talks about a lot of those things. Then I will go back and I will, when they say, yes, I agree to hire you, I will go and I'll say, great, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go fill out, I'm going to go complete the paperwork and let's set up a Zoom. So I will do it over Zoom. I will go back and meet them with my computer. If it's someone who is not comfortable with computers, like my uncle was 80, I don't remember how old he was when we sold his house, 86-ish, I think. There was no way he was signing anything on a computer. So I would literally print everything and go out with pen and paper and have him sign it. So all of the above work. My preferred method is to go over it with them on Zoom, where that way I can make changes on the fly, and then I email it to them and then they go sign it then.
Okay, so essentially you do exactly what you just did with us.
Yes.
Okay.
Pretty
I have
much.
I have another question.
Okay.
So if you are bringing the paper copy in, how do you then, like, do you just scan that to the computer, or how? Yeah, you just
Yep, you can
upload it.
scan it. Yep, if it's signed the old-fashioned way with wet ink, you can absolutely scan it and upload them, and then you need to keep the originals.
Okay.
And you can absolutely turn it on your computer. The only reason I don't do that is because then everything is signed to my IP address. Anybody brain wonder why that would be important to know? Because what happens if somebody comes back and say, I didn't sign that?
Yeah, it doesn't prove that actually somebody else signed it.
Right. So we actually had that. So Charles, back when he was a full-time agent, he was working with some clients. This one wasn't the drug cartel. He's had some interesting stories. But this particular one, it was one of the 2 parties on the contract said, I didn't sign them. And they had to go back through CTM and track the IP address, and we determined that the other party on the contract signed it for them. So if Lee and I were married and we were getting a divorce, and I wasn't in agreement with something, but he signed it for me, and I came back and said, whoa, 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 that's not my signature. I didn't agree to that. They would be able to track it to Lee's IP address. So I don't like having things tracked to my IP address because what if somebody says I didn't sign that, and it tracks to my IP address? Does it look like I, as the broker, did it? So I'm super aware and sensitive to those kinds of things, James. So that's never my first choice. Now, if it's my best friends and I know them both, I'm probably got a better chance of not having a problem.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Liz.
Shoot, I lost my train of thought. Oh, so like, can you, like, if I wanted to go over it on my computer with my client, could I have them then pull it up on their computer as well, and I go through it on mine, or we just go through it on theirs together? Because
You can
then
do that too, right? As long as you emailed it to them and they're accessing it off of their email, you're always going to be golden.
Okay.
But that's pre-filled out?
Yeah. So here's
Okay.
what you want to, yes. So first of all, you guys don't want to create a contract without it being reviewed because you're all in coaching, right? I think so. Casey's in the process, I believe. So, you need to have your contracts reviewed by either, Corey or myself, just to make sure that they're good before your clients even sign them. Right. So then I go over them while they're still open, they're not signed and locked. And so if there is a change, if they say, no, we really want it, we don't want the washer and dryer, we decided we're going to leave it here because it's going to cost too much to move it, I can easily move that from inclusions to exclusions while I'm going through the contract with them. And I will tell you, I mean, I'm pretty good at this. And I will tell you, when I go through listing contracts with my sellers, we're often tweaking things as we go. But you'll have the high level piece already signed off on, where, changing the remotes from 1 to 2 isn't going to change the contract.
And what are the things that you're normally changing? The solar panels, the items that you want to stay with the house, the items you want to go with the house? Are those the main things that you're dealing with?
Typically, yeah. And even like solar panels, usually I've asked those questions at the listing consultation. And so I've already got notes. So like if you were to look at, so Bob and I are looking at co-listing a property together, out east here about an hour. And if you go back to both of our notebooks, there'll be notes that say this is included, this is not included. In this case, tractor is negotiable. And then I always, during my listing consultation, will also walk the house and take a video on my phone. So that's my information. So if I know, like if I was going to sell, if any of you were going to come sell my townhouse in Candelas, there's no solar panels on it. And you would know that from the listing consultation. So you wouldn't have put solar panels into the contract.
(10-4), thank you.
Yeah, I use that listing consultation to find out a lot of the information I'm going to need to fill out the listing contract.
And
So
then
that then I'm only tweaking little things.
how often do you do these contract classes? And then do you do like multiple different, I mean, like next time we do a contract class, it's going to be a different contract?
Yes. So our intention is to have a contracts class a month. So I think next month, Kevin Wilson's actually teaching his 4-hour contract to buy and sell class. So you usually will find one a month on the calendar, taught by either Charles or myself or Kevin. You also have access on the YouTubes, and the coaching YouTube channel. Like you can find the recording, like the recording of this class will
Okay.
probably be on the office YouTube and the coaching YouTube. And then that way, you can go and watch them. So like I had an agent this weekend send us a contract and he goes, I hope I got it right. I watched your class and Charles's class. And I sent back with like 2 tweaks. Right. So you've got access, even if we haven't yet taught that class live, or you haven't had the ability, or you couldn't make it that day. It's also great to go back and listen to them. Right. So that type of stuff. So Lee, you asked the question, how do you get contracts reviewed? We actually, so there's two things. So you've got your listing consultation. That's your listing presentation. That's you go out to the house, you are meeting with the client, you're viewing the property to give you an idea of probably where you're going to price it. It's about selling the client. So if I'm out there and I'm out there with Jeff at Jeff's house, and I'm going through, this is what I would do to sell your house. I go through the entire listing presentation. And I say, so Jeff, what do you think? Any other questions? Are you ready to put me to work? And he says, let's do it. Let's go. I'll say, fantastic. Here's what will happen next. I'm going to go back to my office tomorrow. I'm going to fill out all of the paperwork formalizing that you are hiring me as your listing agent. It's that point in time, Lee, that I go in and I create the exclusive right to sell. I create all of the disclosures that I need for Jeff to sign. Then if I'm in coaching or I'm a new agent, need my contract reviewed, after I've filled it all out, I send it to, if you're in coaching, we have an email. I'll find you the email address because I guarantee you it's in my phone. It's pckwave45@kw.com. So you send your contracts to pckwave45@kw.com, and whichever coach is on contract review that week will review, give you feedback, and if we need to jump on a Zoom to help you through things, we'll do that. After we have signed off on your paperwork, that's when then you will then do a Zoom with your client to go through the contracts. Did that help clear up that mud?
Mm-hmm.
I'm waiting for Lee to give me a thumbs up. Maybe that was the perfect. Okay, thank you. I'm used to your thumbs up, Lee. So, yeah, I cannot remember a single time where I went out to a property, did a listing consultation, and signed the exclusive right to sell on the spot. One, I don't want that stress on me and the fear of me messing up that contract. I want time to go do that legal contract well. And even my own, I always review them. So one of the things that I do, so I have filled out the contract, right? So this is the template that I'm using, right? And I'm typing away, right? Okay. I will go in to print preview. And now I'm looking at it. Did I miss anything? So as I go through this one, I go, oh my God, I forgot to put a date on it. All right. So I go back here and I put in the date. I review it and go through it. I don't just like fill it out and not look at it. I look at it completed because here's the beauty. All of the blue ink tells you where you did stuff. And you can see, did I miss this? Did I catch that? I find something every time. And like I said, I probably look at, I don't know, 300 some contracts a year. Okay. All right. What else are we supposed to talk about today? What else is in here? That's the listing contract.
I mean, obviously you want to get the exclusive right to list the person's property, but how do you like does anybody ever question that when you're going over the contract with them?
You mean question why they have to sign an exclusive right to sell?
Well, yeah, because I mean, yeah, exactly.
Well, Mr. Seller, if you don't sign this, I don't have permission to market your property. So I can't put it in the MLS for you.
But there's multiple ways to list somebody's property, right?
Tell me more.
Well, there's just more ways to list somebody's property. So like, I mean, the exclusive right means it gives that person the exclusive right. Like what if the person wanted, to either sell it themselves or.
Well, if they want to do a for sale by owner, first of all, they're never going to hire me. So I wouldn't
But on the
have
off chance that they're like, well, just in case, so that never comes up.
No, and I'll be honest, right? So I did have an agent a couple of years ago where somebody wanted to do the what's the scenario where they sign a listing agreement with multiple agents and whoever gets it done wins and all the rest of us just wasted our money? I won't even I won't even take those listings, right? So
Gotcha.
your most common scenario is that you're either going to be the exclusive right listing agent or they're FSBO. Like there's not a lot of those. It's been a while since I taught real estate school, but we don't even do those. And I'm not even sure anymore if we can in Colorado.
Okay.
You're going to have fun when Damien's in the house teaching.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you're going to have fun.
I
So
was
this
having
is
fun
this
today too. So
good. Good. No, I like the questions. Questions are good, right? Questions tell me you're actually paying attention and with me. The seller advisory, this is the document that Damien creates for our office. Here's what I would tell all of you guys to do. Read it. It goes through, and this is what I tell my seller. Mr. Seller, this seller advisory basically walks you through everything that can potentially happen in a contract. It starts with making sure that you review it, and it goes through, talks about what happens in the case of an earnest money dispute. It talks about your possession of the property after closing, talks about loan fraud, wire fraud. It talks about tax consequences, everything. Read that over, and please, after you've read it over, just sign it. As brokers, the seller advisory and the buyer advisory that Damien has written is going to help you so much as brokers to understand the things that are happening. So make sure you take time to read these things. As Corey said yesterday in coaching, read a contract a day, or spend 10 minutes reading whichever contract you want and get comfortable with it. Then here's a sample of the lead-based paint obligation of sellers. This is a document that is required when you have a property where it was permitted prior to January 1st, 1978. And this just explains to the seller all of the fact that if they have information about lead-based paint in the home, that they're going to disclose it. So this is signed by the seller, and the information, the addresses will flow over. Then you've got the actual lead-based paint disclosure. Please do not ever, ever, ever fill this out for your clients. In CTM, if I was to pull it up, it's going to look like this, but the seller has to click boxes before that it will actually give them the signature box. So they have to choose. And number 2, the seller has no knowledge of any lead-based paint, or they have knowledge. Which is it? They do or they don't. Check the box. Second part, seller has no reports or seller has report. And they're going to revise, and they're going to give them to the buyer. They're going to check that box. One time I had a seller who actually had knowledge, because when she had windows replaced in her 1950s ranch in Alta Vista, the window replacement company actually tested for lead and found it and gave her a copy of that report. So we just uploaded it in MLS and checked that she had knowledge and she had reports. Okay. Then when she signs it, then later the buyers, then they check their box and sign it. Seller's property disclosure. Is this the current one? Yes. So this is not. There's a newer one out there that actually has the radon in it. But again, do not fill out any of this for your client. So Mr. Seller, this is about you telling what you know about the property. Now you want to read these sections closely, because Liz, you'll notice here, it says under building conditions, if you know of any problems ever existing, check yes. So if you've had a structural issue, check yes. Where that gets crazy is that people will say yes, like under appliances. If you know of any problems now existing with the following, check yes. This isn't yes, I have a clothes dryer. This is there's a problem with my clothes dryer. So just be careful, Liz, when you're filling this out that you read each section. And then I want to take you to section, let me find it, section H. So Liz, on this particular section, you're going to want to make sure that you fill out the source of water. And there's actually a drop down box there. So your property is served by Denver Water. You can hit this little drop down box and pick Denver Water, and it'll fill out those boxes for you. Okay, so that's that. And then the square footage disclosure. There's the source of water. Again, if you have If your seller fills out the source of water on the property disclosure, you do not have to do the source of water addendum. If they don't properly fill out the source of water, then you have to do the source of water addendum here. Watch out for your townhome and condo people. They love to say the source of water is the HOA. The source of water is not the HOA. The HOA pays for it. The source of water is wherever the source of water is. Okay. Square footage disclosure. This is going to be filled out by you guys, the broker. Section 1 is, are you or are you not as the broker measuring the property? I just recommend always has not. Unless you have been trained on how to properly manage or how to measure a house, don't do it. Okay. Your other sources is, but you can give them the information. So you're going to check the is box, and then you're going to show where you got it. So your client might have a prior appraisal. That might be your source. I oftentimes will use the assessor's office. Also, we've learned, Amanda and Nikki have found that out in Candelas, the builders did a very poor job of properly reporting to the county the actual square footages of the homes they're building. So they actually will pay TJ, who's in our office, who's an appraiser, and have him go out and measure the property. So they'll use an actual measurement from an appraiser. When you fill out the square footage disclosure, you want to disclose everything, meaning above ground, basement, total, and total finished. So you don't want to just fill in one number here. So what I like to do on mine, and I'll just show you on a Word document how I do it. But I'll just type in 1,549 above ground, 1,549 basement. So what is that total? Of course, I gave myself a number I can't do in my head, right? So what is that? That's 3,098 total. And let's say that I've got 2,500 finished because I didn't fully finish the basement. Whoa, it ran away. There it is. So that's how I would disclose and type out on my property, on my square footage disclosure. I want above ground, basement, total, and finished. Okay. Questions on that?
Where can you show me again where you're putting that on the paper?
Yep. Yeah, I can. Hold on, I gotta find the right one. Right here. So see where it says square footage? So the date is the date you either pull the report from the assessor's office, or if you had it measured, what the date of the measurement was. And then all of that I just showed you on that Word document goes here. Okay. And then if you need to make an amendment to your listing contract, this is the document you would use. So which kind of document are you adjusting? It could be the exclusive right to sell or the exclusive right to buy. This is the exclusive right to sell class. So we're going to check the exclusive right to sell. It's going to pull from the contract the original date and the legal description and address for you. And then what are you amending? You might be changing your end date. Maybe the seller's firing you or you're firing the seller. Then the date ending the listing period is changed to here. Or maybe you're extending it. Maybe you're taking that 1 year hard to buy, hard to sell property and you're extending it for another year. You would put that year extension out here. If you're changing the price, it goes here. If you're correcting inclusions or exclusions, you might change, then you would put that down here in section 3. And then who is this person? In our case today, it's a seller. Okay. One of the biggest mistakes I see agents make is y'all go make price changes in the MLS, but you don't have an amendment capturing the price change. So who gave you permission to change the price? So every price change has to include a signed listing amendment, contract amendment, before you change the price in the listing contract or in the list MLS. Okay.
So you must do a lot of those then, or no?
Do a lot of what?
A lot of listing amend and extend.
Actually, I
for
don't.
price. Oh, you don't? Okay. So you
Not
just,
in my world. I
Okay.
no, we don't. But as a coach, I see everything. As a coach, I see everything. So I think actually I've only probably had to amend a listing contract. In 9 years, I've probably done 3 price changes that had required this.
okay.
Not bad.
And now this amended extension, this is only for price, or this is for everything, for like if you need to, if you put like a 90-day listing contract and it's going to go beyond the 90-day, this is the same form.
Yep.
Okay.
Anything that's going to change in your original exclusive right to sell, you would use this form. Yep. Okay.
And that even goes with say they want to take their range stove with them. That would be in this as well.
Yeah, exactly. If they suddenly decide, oh my God, Margaret, the new build is that we just found out the new build's not going to give us, it's usually a refrigerator more than a stove, but we just found out we're going to have to buy a refrigerator. We want to take ours with us. Can we change that before we go live in the MLS? Sure. I'm going to capture that change here. Good question. Good question. All right. Okay, so I got a chat question. Is it better to work with a coach as we are writing the contract, or just have the contract reviewed after we fill it out on our own? So funny. Corey and I were having this conversation this morning. I believe that you guys, if you took really good notes today, should be able to take a really good stab at an exclusive right to sell or any contract, right? I think that we always learn better trying first and then letting us correct. So my answer to you, Lee, would be go take a jab at it and then get us with you. Okay. Any other questions? Everybody disappeared. I had at least Liz and Jeff on the screen and they ran away. All right. Any other questions that I can answer for you guys?
You know what would be
Or-
cool is if like you're gonna get a listing, it would be cool to like, let everybody know that you're getting this listing so that we could practice on that property, writing a listing agreement for you to review just as practice. So it's like a real life scenario. I mean, I guess I could do that with any property, but it just makes it a little more real since it's not like we're going to use it's not like we're going to kick you out of the seat or anything, but I think that would be pretty cool if that's something that you guys offered or thought about.
Yeah. So I love that idea. I probably wouldn't do it with the one that I think we're going to be signing next because it is extremely complicated, which is why Bob and I are doing it together.
Okay.
However, I think Stacy has one coming up that we could do on that's a little more normal here in the city. The other thing is, do you own your own home, James?
No, currently I'm renting. So
Okay.
I've
I was
never
to say,
owned.
write one up on your house.
I know. Actually, well, I guess I could practice on a buddy of mine. He actually just started with Keller Williams. He's at the Dixon Group down in Centennial, but he's selling his house. He's going to put it on the market, I think, November 1st. So maybe we can practice with his, and then I can shoot you over that and see if I did well enough.
Yep. Or you can, I mean, I'll be really transparent. There's nothing wrong with writing up one with, Fred and Wilma Flintstone, right? Just
Gotcha.
make stuff up, right? And Corey and I have actually talked about, writing up some contract scenarios where you could go do exactly what you're saying, right? Like we could say, okay, you're right, you're representing the Flintstones and here's all the specs on their house, write a listing contract, right? Okay, now you represent the Rubbles and they're hiring you to buy a property, fill out the buyer agencies, right? Like we've thought about writing those up. It's just been time, and I'm just really happy that now I have a second coach so we can implement some of those things I've wanted to do for a long time.
Cool.
Yeah,
Awesome.
lots of cool stuff coming your guys' way. All right, anything else? Going once? We got done with 4 minutes to spare. Yes. All right, you guys, go find some listings, go meet some people, go talk to some people. Go make new friends, go be a better friend, and have an awesome day. And I will talk to y'all later.
Thanks a lot, Margaret.
Bye.
Thank you, Margaret.